Hello, Bonsai friends. This is Evan Pardue of Underhill Bonsai, and welcome to episode 36 of Little Things for Bonsai People, the podcast. And this time, I am joined by my co-host, Mike Lane of Kitsune Bonsai. How's it going, Mike?
Hey guys, how's it going? Happy 4th of July.
Oh, yeah. This episode will be released on the 5th of July, but yeah, happy 4th of July for you international listeners out there. That is our country's Independence Day, so it's great.
Yeah.
It's gonna be lots of fireworks, lots of loud noises. I'm gonna be trying to sleep.
I know, me too. That's what I'm gonna do.
I'm tired. It's been hot, but yeah. But before I get into it, I would like to let everyone know. Oh, but I have to say the topic of the episode first. Topic episode. Since we got Mike back, unfortunately we don't have Carmen. We can't coordinate it. We can't get both of our amazing co-hosts at the same time, but we're gonna do what we can. We got Mike here to talk about sea hibiscus today.
It's like Jeopardy. Like one day you're gonna get Ken Jennings, and one day you get what's her name, Maya.
Yeah. I don't watch it a whole lot. I'm sorry to offend anybody out there that's really into game shows. I know there's a lot of people out there. It's like a whole cult following of game shows nowadays.
I'm just old.
Nah, man. You're not that old.
No, but I'm Jeopardy old.
But yeah, Mike's gonna talk to us about sea hibiscus. This episode was requested by one of our Bonsai Best Bud. Can't remember which one, but somebody requested it and wanted to hear a whole readout on how they work, why are they good for bonsai, give a general overview of sea hibiscus, kind of like what we did with tiger bark a little while back. I would also really like to do one for bald cypress. I know I've done some stuff in the past for bald cypress, but I did see a conversation pop up in the Discord about pond cypress versus bald cypress, and I'm itching to answer that question, that conversation. But yeah, before we get into it, though, I need to mention that our podcast is sponsored by our amazing patrons, which we call our Bonsai Best Buds. And we have a Discord, and all these great people are in the Discord. If you want to be one of those people, you can go over to patreon.com/little things for bonsai people, become a Bonsai Best Bud. Every little thing helps the show grow. Come hang out, be part of the community. We all have a great time talking, chatting about bonsai. Our list goes as follows: Torio Solis, Warehouse Rat, Boyd Snellgrove, Ricky Ruins, Joshua Bentley, Snappy Chappers, Ryan Giordano, Joel Jenkins, Justin Knight, Backyard Bonsai Australia, The Ladies at Flower Market, Taylor Peacock, Chase Pertweet, Vicky Auth, Austin Atkins, and Karen Codswell. Thank you guys for being Bonsai Best Buds. Can't wait to talk to you in the Discord. I know I presented on the last episode, we said we're doing the cutting challenge. Mike, you weren't aware of this. We're doing a challenge where we're taking cuttings of species that we're really interested in working with, and we're doing 10 of them, 15 if we feel like it, 20 if we want to be awesome, and we're sticking them, we're getting roots in them this year, and we're twisting them hard. We're going to start some really cool trees, and we're going to share the results as we move on. That's why people are asking about sea hibiscus in the chat for the Patreon.
Yeah,
I was going to meet for Discord. Mm-hmm.
That's exactly how I've been building trees in the last few years. I've been basically, I don't know, it's been very rewarding. Like it's almost been like a farmer. So I grow like a crop of sea hibiscus. I grow a crop of bluebells, and I grow a crop of like tiger bark and a few other things. And I do just what you said. I wire up some and I'll twist them up. And then I start doing clip and grow with others, starting to build taper and making like cool, like sumo style trees. And I usually get somewhere looking like a bonsai after about a year, of up potting those trees. And I will usually keep about 5 of those for myself and get rid of the rest, sell them or trade them to, Weigerts. And then I pare it down to the best 2, and I keep those. And what I'm getting at is that each year, the best 2 that end up in my garden are better than the year before. So I'm always learning something from each crop I do. And so, it almost like in a way devalues the previous work, because I always anticipate getting something better. And so I've gotten over that feeling of like, I'm in love with my work. I have to hold on to this forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And it's made it easier to sell things. So it's been overall just doing it that way has been extremely rewarding.
Yeah. And that's what I want our listeners and best buds to experience, is that is that experience of building trees from the absolute beginnings, ground fundamentals, and kind of guide their hands go through at, well, virtually, I guess you can say, or listening as much as you can get from a podcast. But and so I'm just hoping to further, the encouragement of those techniques and just show off results. And so uh, I don't really need to ask you, Mike, to go and take cuttings and start this challenge because you've already done dozens upon dozens of trees like this before. So people could always go to your Instagram, which would be Kitsune Bonsai, and go over there and check out Mike's work. If you guys want some inspiration for the cutting challenge, that's one place to start. And some of your stuff recently on there is way past the cutting stage now, but you have to scroll pretty far down to see some of the earlier stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I'm always starting new ones. Like I just potted up some that are just a year old, and they're little red stems that not even a year old. I shouldn't even say a year old. They're maybe like 8 months old. And they're like nice little shohin already. They don't have branching, but I was looking at some of the trees that are imported and whatnot. And a lot of times, honestly, especially with the smaller material, it's usually like mames. It's a trunk that has like one or two twists, and then they just like build the branches around that. And that's one quick way. I call that quick interest. So I like I was saying before, I have two ways of building trees. I have trees that are quick interest, and I rely on movement. So movement can be placed into the cutting very quickly, and but in a way, I feel that it's almost cheap interest. It's easy interest. And so as much as I like it, I do still think it takes more time to like chop and heal, and like build a tree, bone by bone with taper. So I do think that that's the more, I don't want to say it's better, but I think that there's definitely more work involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we'll get into on building trees and also utilizing sea hibiscus as well for those techniques. But before we get too far with that, we'll go ahead and get into some of our listener comments and questions from our patrons and our Discord, and just kind of cover a few things. So just wanted to say, Backyard Bonsai Australia has mentioned in the past that he would like to hear more from you. Love to see you back on. So you're back on, Mike. So that's
back.
Part of the dream has come true. But also he mentioned Jerry Mielinski.
Oh, Meislik. Yeah.
Meislik, yeah.
So
Go ahead.
So Jerry, yeah, I messaged him as well. And Jerry is I'm gonna reach out to him. I gotta reach out to Jerry and find out for sure. But Jerry sold all his trees to Weigert's, and
Ooh.
as far as I know, is basically retired from bonsai. So I'm sure he's probably still more than happy to come on and talk with us. But but yeah, that was something that I just wanted to make him aware of.
Yeah. We'll check in with Jerry and see if he wants to talk to us. A couple of young chaps on here, talking about bonsai and what we think. I think that would be a fun time. It's always fun to talk to the other generation. It's a pity to hear that that he sold all of his trees. I remember seeing a lot of his trees listed on Weigert's. Now that you mention it.
But when you really think of this as like bonsai is like a hamster wheel. Like this is what I always teach students is we're only curators. So you have the tree for a while, and you're going to get to a point where you don't want to take care of all those trees anymore. I mean, as cool as they are, as much as you love them, it's just going to get to the point, I assume, that you're just like, you know what, I can't keep doing this like fight. You're always fighting the variables
motion
that are coming into the garden. Yeah, everything's always trying to like just eat your work away, and you have to stay ahead of it, and it gets tiring.
Yeah. Sometimes, like you said, with the hamster wheel, sometimes you just have to get off.
You just got to jump off when you can. Everything's looking good. Trees are growing good. I'm out.
Yeah, it's spinning. It looks like it's going to hold up. And then you throw somebody else on the wheel and say, here, you keep it. You keep going. You take this
It's
somewhere
your turn
else.
to run for 50 years.
Yeah. And then there was also a mention of I accidentally stumbled upon saying "How you going," which is actually a greeting in Australia. I did not know that, and apparently it turns out okay that I'm using that. So I have approval to keep using "How you going."
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And there was another question from Taylor Peacock. He wants to know, is there a limit to the thickness of a branch when taking an air layer? What's the biggest you've had a success with or seen success with?
Not,
I have my own story, but go ahead.
not. I mean, I'm sure there is a limit, but I mean, within the realm of what you'll be using for bonsai, no. I would say, like,
You
I mean,
can
you could
take
do
whatever you want.
things. Yeah, I mean, you could basically air layer something that's like my waist thick, and I mean, you can take cuttings that are that big. We've taken bougainvillea cuttings. Well, Eric
Oh
has
God, yeah.
has taken
Bougainvillea is a
bougainvillea
beast.
cuttings that are, way thicker than my trunk. And so, it, yeah, I think that there's not really a size limit on certain species. Some species are just not going to air layer at all, regardless. But for the most part, really aggressive things, sea hibiscus, most ficus, some maples. It should be
Hmm.
pretty prolific.
And that kind of brings me back to some of the air layer conversation I've had in the past with Carmen, and this has come up a few times. Is it worth taking a air layer on a piece when it gets to a certain size? And I think there is a limit, unless unless the part that you're trying to air layer off of there, if it's got a bigger than average trunk, for something that you'd be comfortable with, and you're willing to try to apply the proper air layer techniques, if it's special, if
If
it's
it's
got like,
special.
it's got to be special. It's got to have bends, twists,
Right.
some point of heavy interest, something that, or maybe the tree has some merit to it. Maybe it's an
Uh,
old Mochikome
yeah.
dripping bonsai that needs an air layer.
Yeah, don't air layer to air layer, and don't air layer straight stuff. Don't and even big stuff. Big stuff doesn't necessarily save you anything. Big stuff usually means there's a big wound somewhere on the tree, and it's just usually going to have other issues. So usually I will do big air layers. The times I will do big air layers are for mature refined trees that could benefit from having better roots, maybe higher up on the trunk, and that's usually when I'll do big air layers. But usually the biggest I'll go that I find usable is probably about 3-4 inches wide, and that's about
Hmm.
as wide as I'll go.
Yeah, and that's on a lot of tropical species too. You can get away with that kind of stuff pretty
Yeah, I
easily.
still I still don't do honestly, I do more cuttings than anything. I just think you have more oversight over the tree as a whole. And like I said, I reserve air layers for corrective techniques more often than not, rather than propagation.
Yeah. And I'm sure one of our other bonsai best buds and local homies, Joel Jenkins, wouldn't mind me bringing this up. A story about his one of his cuttings. I mean, not cuttings, but air layer that he took off of a Acer rubrum, his big red maple in his yard, or I don't know if it was in his yard exactly. I don't know the exact story on this tree, but I know it was accessible to him. And he ended up taking an air layer off of a piece that was somewhere around 10 inches
Mhm.
on a red maple, which is, I mean, that it was really awesome that it took. And I've heard of other people doing this with red maples, Chinese elms, trident maples, stuff like that. But yeah, it does come up to the point where you said like it's a straight section of a trunk. So it's almost like a log
It's a log.
of a tree.
Yeah.
And I was looking it over with him one time at the Baton Rouge, Louisiana Bonsai Society. And I'm just like, he's like, what do I do with this? And I'm like, well, but you got roots on it and it's got plenty of branching. But I mean, with that particular species too, and this is one thing that you have to keep in mind for our listeners that are taking uh what's the word for it? When you're just making a bold move, basically if you're boldly taking a large straight cutting like that, know the species, because one of those things to be said about Acer rubrum is that it's a soft bark, short-lived tree, and so it can rot through, especially when you're taking a huge chunk. That's not a root base you're getting off of that. That's a giant wound, well,
Mm.
at the bottom with roots around it. So you're going to either have to grow the hell out of that thing real fast and let the roots run real long and like into like a pancake, or to get the cambium build up to get back into the middle and close that little section up on the bottom, or it's just going to rot through. So I mean, it's what's worth it to you taking an air layer. Sometimes, like Mike is saying, like sometimes it's just better to take a cutting and just start from the beginning.
One of my favorite sayings of all time is some juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Yep, I've heard you say that dozens of times.
Yeah, some juice isn't worth the squeeze. And, the tough pill to swallow is that straight stuff is not impressive. Like size alone is not impressive. So having a big tree could mean that you just have a big mediocre tree. And so that's one of the reasons why I decided to get into Shohin earlier on. It wasn't because I necessarily loved small trees. It was that through Eric's teachings, I kind of learned that what I could afford, if I were to hone it and concentrate quality down into the most condensed tree I could buy, then I could buy 6 inches of quality. That's what I could afford. And so to buy, 24 inches of quality is going to be very expensive. And it's going to take a lot of time to make that. And so a straight section isn't enough. A big chunky tree isn't enough. It's got to have the proportions. And that's not to discourage anybody, but rather it's to kind of point you in the right direction and know that we still have a lot of work to do. Okay. So.
But yeah, and then reference to taking cuttings and stuff. Went back, looked on the Discord, had a lot of people asking about trees that they've been looking around at, and there's one. Someone has a sea hibiscus just growing like into an actual tree in their yard.
Yeah, it looked like that's a nice sea hibiscus. I would definitely take some cuttings, and if you're up to the challenge, I can't tell exactly how big it was in the picture, but it looks diggable. Meaning that looks like something that you could pull out and work on. And but honestly, like I was saying before, is you'll probably get over the course of 3 years, you will probably end up with higher quality trees from the cuttings you take.
Yeah. In reference to the listeners that can't see what we're talking about, it's this hibiscus. It looks like, from the size of the leaf that I'm aware of, how big they kind of get like saucer size, like little like tea saucer, like something you would do like your little fancy tea off of, like the size of the palm of your fingers all the way around your hand.
Yes,
as big as your face. And so the leaves are big on this tree, and the trunk, I'm assuming, looks like it's somewhere around 8 to 10 inches in diameter. If I'm correct on that, it could be.
That's what it looks like. Yeah.
The upper parts of the tree, but it's definitely a sea hibiscus. You see the nice dark green leaves and the highlighted reddish leaves, and then I see a variegated sea hibiscus on here.
Yeah, there's another one in the chat. This one though, it's pretty big, but I'd still go for it.
Okay, so that leads us straight into sea hibiscus and our conversation about sea hibiscus, and there's obviously a lot of things to be said about quality of leaf, internode spacing, quality of trunk, growth rates, variegated ones versus red stemmed ones versus regular greens versus what else is out there, cork bark ones. So kind of ease us into this, and then I'll see what I can tease out of you for sea hibiscus.
Sea hibiscus is kind of a quirky species. It's something that I've really honestly dedicated probably 15 years of study to this species, trying to A, learn it, and B, to promote it as material. It's extremely popular in Southeast Asia and in tropical bonsai everywhere else in the world, and is just now starting to gain popularity in the US. And I consider it one of the three or four like top tropical kind of hierarchy species, kind of like how you have the black pine, Japanese maple, azalea, so on and so forth. There are certain trees that no matter where you go in the tropics, people will be growing that material. And sea hibiscus is one of those trees. So wherever you go in the world, the tropical climate, you're going to find sea hibiscus. So it's really, really a versatile material. One of the things I made a lot of mistakes early on was I would go to Weigert's and I would buy like a $25 tree, and I would kind of make a trunk chop, and I would start growing the tree and I would look at the tree and I would compare it to Min Swan Lo. He's a famous Taiwanese artist. I'd compare it to some of his famous sea hibiscus. And I'd look at him and I'd see, okay, well, his book says that in 6 years, my sea hibiscus will look like this. Well, I waited 6 years and my sea hibiscus didn't look like that. So I said, okay, well, maybe I need to wire it a lot. Maybe I need to do this, do that. Maybe I'm working with the wrong species. So I kept pursuing different species, not different species, different varieties. And what I finally found was I had to rethink everything. I had to rethink my methodology of growing them. So now I really do grow most of my sea hibiscus under a semi-clip and grow method, meaning I run branches out, I cut them back hard, like really, really, really hard to like little 1 or 2 internode stubs. And that's the only way I've made interesting material out of these trees. So on top of that, it did help to find better varieties, as Evan mentioned, like other trees like Japanese maples. There are ones that are going to lend themselves to it, and there are ones that are going to make it very, very difficult in your pursuit of a fine bonsai. It doesn't mean that they won't all be good. And so like any of those sea hibiscus that are in the Discord will make great trees. But how much effort are you going to put in to get to that same tree? A popular one right now, the most popular sea hibiscus is known as red stem. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a misnomer because a lot of them have red stems, but this specific one buds back way more than most of the others. It has a leaf that gets way smaller, way easier, and it seems to get denser faster. And so with no sacrifice of the speed at which it grows. And so it's a superior variety for bonsai. It makes your life easier. Now, I've grown great ones with the typical greens. I've grown great ones with the native Florida reds. I've grown tons of different varieties. And it was all a matter of how much effort did I had to put in to get to the same result.
So I didn't know that there was a native Florida red.
Yep.
And so I think we should kind of look at too. You say this is a superior tropical. This is on the top of the list. But where are we going to find these? Is just, I feel like, it might sound like, oh, it's a little rudimentary of a question, but where are sea hibiscus from? So our listeners who are not familiar with them could kind of see where they would have them or have to go get them, or if they can even keep them in their own zone.
So they're typically, they typically grow zone 8 through 10, down to equatorial regions. But in our area in the Northern Hemisphere, zone 8 to 10 usually, they don't like freezes, so they can't handle a hard freeze. And where you'll typically find them if you are in a tropical locale is down by the coast. So they're a coastal tree. They tend to kind of intermingle with mangroves, sea grapes, things like that. And when we first collected one, the first time I was ever even introduced to the species, we collected one and we thought it was a sea grape. And it was literally somebody, after it grew leaves, somebody came and they're like, that's not a sea grape, that's a sea hibiscus. And we had no idea what it was. And that basically started the whole journey. So
how long ago was this?
About 15 years ago.
So that's would that be your actual introduction to the species then?
That was the actual introduction. But what's weird is I had already read Minlo's book and we didn't make the correlation that they were the same tree. It looked nothing like the trees in the book. And so it had these giant leaves. The trees in the book had super tiny leaves. And so it was a lesson right there in that you can't judge bonsai material necessarily just by looking at the coarse internodes that are growing while it's in the ground or under optimal conditions. A lot of these materials through proper bonsai techniques can be dwarfed and can be reduced and can be fantastic bonsai material. So, Premna, when you see Premna growing wild, they look like a weed. I would never collect a Premna for bonsai if I saw them growing the way they grow, just wild. I would just bypass that. And so...
you know what Premna reminds me of?
What?
Like if it were just to be grown freely, it reminds me of privet.
Yeah. It just looks like a dirty privet.
It looks like junk, yeah.
Yeah.
Like a big leaf privet. And it even has the same flower clusters that privet has.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I think that I think that anybody who can find one of these in the coastal locations, you could take some cuttings, take a small tree, and you're basically on your way because the one in the Discord looks like a Florida red.
Mm.
And the variegated, I'm pretty sure, pull from very similar genes to that Florida red. And so it's good material. Really I've only worked with a few that I would say I kind of junked them. They were these varieties that we found that upon further research is like a divergent family of C. hibiscus that we don't use, we don't
Mm.
pursue. And
Interesting.
so, yeah,
So
so it's a
sea hibiscus. Okay, so for just the sake of kind of breaking down the species, so the
ooh, here we go.
nomenclature.
All right. So the problem is it's not a hibiscus or it's not classified as a hibiscus, but
Ooh, interesting.
um it is a part of the mallow family. And so which are also related to hibiscus. It's all very similar plants.
Mallow. Okay.
So these are all super similar plants. And recently they have moved C. hibiscus from Hibiscus thalassius to Talipariti thalassius. So now
Mm.
it's in its own, I don't know if you'd say that. It's a genus. Yeah, genus. So it's in its own genus, Talipariti. And there are other Taliparitis, other than thalassius. And so some of these Taliparitis are not as good as like thalassius. And so keep in mind, like a ton of different traits can be exhibited in just one species. So like when we were talking with Sergio about Japanese maples, that's the same species, whether you're working with the coral bark type or whether you're working with Arakawa or whether you're working with the green, standard green, as different as they look and as different as they grow, they're the same species. They're just different cultivars.
Mm.
So Thalassius is the best, but there are even more superior cultivars of Thalassius.
Yeah. Yeah, and for reference, Mike dropping a reference to our earlier episode with Sergio. If you want to see how far the rabbit hole goes when it comes to Japanese maples, when it comes to cultivars, that's kind of going into the realm that we're entering with sea hibiscus now. You go refer back to that episode that we had with Sergio, and that was episode. I always like to go back for reference. 29. That was a good episode.
Yeah, it was a good episode.
So yeah, for our Tillies, that's what I kind of call them
Tillies.
That's a pet name for the sea hibiscus. Kind of like how
Yeah.
you call the bogey, the bougainvillea, the bogey.
Yeah.
But yeah, so break them down into so most valuable in your mind to less like harder to work with, I guess, variety of this speed. And what was the
Sure.
nomenclature again?
I would say that they're cultivars
Cultivars
of Thalassius.
Thalassius.
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead.
So I would say red stem is number one. And then there's a second variety that I haven't really put into production yet that I'm growing out that flowers constantly. That's all it does. So for every leaf it puts off, it flowers 10 flowers.
What?
So yeah, and so it's a little mini sea hibiscus too. It's pretty dwarfed, and it's
Oh
it's
my
a green
God.
variety.
What's the
And
name
so
so I can Google it real quick?
I have no idea. It's one I found as a cutting while doing private sessions, and so that's one that's into production, and that's
Awesome.
probably my second favorite.
Okay.
And then I would say there's a variety that Seth had found that is like in between the red stem and like the green, the standard like Brussels green, and
Hmm.
really good genes. I mean, really, really good grower. I'd say it's very similar to red stem, and it gets a frosted like underside to the leaf that I really like a silver underside.
Okay.
Really like that one. Then there's the most common, which is the Taiwan import green from Brussels that you'll see a lot.
Yeah.
And that's honestly, I've made some killer trees out of that material. And I'd say that's the most durable. That's probably the one that's most of a tank where you can just do whatever you want with it. So in a way, that's probably my tried and true. I'll never give up on that one. And
Mhm.
then honestly, the one that's been most difficult to work with has been there's a variety of the Florida red that gets like a corky bark.
Mhm.
And I have a really hard time keeping the leaves. The leaves are very thin and the leaves get distorted and misshapen very easily. And
Ah,
so if you overwater them a little too much or things aren't perfect, then the leaves look terrible.
then you ought
And
as well just
so
step back to the green at that
I
point.
basically grafted it to red stem. So I said, I'm done with this. I've played enough with your leaves and now I'm over it. So that's the other thing is you can mix traits by grafting. You can, cross pollinate and create your own cultivars. And so it's a lot of fun to get into the farm mentality of doing bonsai.
And the one that you said's like a mini and it flowers like for
Hmm.
each. That's a question I've gotten from a few people when I introduced them to the sea hibiscus. Is the first thing that you think, because whenever you mention hibiscus to somebody, they think of the big, showy, colorful flowers of different varieties. And I mean they could be anything. They could be massive, they could be medium to small. So tell us about that sea hibiscus, like just the normal one, and then let's talk about that multiple blooming one. Since I've never heard,
Yeah.
you'll have to send me a picture of it too. So,
So, so in all honesty, the only until recently, the only sea hibiscus I was able to get to consecutively bloom was the Taiwan import green
mm,
and the standard Brussels one. And it's not like a great bloomer by any means. Like
oop,
I would have to grow a runner and extend a runner very, very long off the tree to get it to start to bloom out on the ends. And then it blooms like one flower per day. And so you get like one flower comes out and it comes out bright yellow. And then as the day progresses, it turns red and then falls off at the end of the day. So
huh,
it's really a good, like, it really is like a good kind of study for wabi sabi because you don't get a lot of time to enjoy it. And then
yeah,
the next day you have a new flower. And
hmm,
so you kind of get to enjoy it over and over until that cluster of flowers is done.
interesting.
Well, with this new variety, the flowers are a lot smaller. So the flowers are smaller than the typical sea hibiscus. And B, it will bloom multiples. And C, it blooms nonstop. So right after it finishes one bloom, it might go to seed, but then it starts blooming again right after that on tight within the design. So once these are into production, I foresee because I saw one that was basically a canopy of flowers. So,
That sounds awesome.
yeah, that's the plan.
So, and this is one thing that I've kind of experienced. Well, not kind of. I mean, this is the experience I've had with sea hibiscus. Is that the normal green, which is a lot of the stuff that I have at my nursery at Underhill, is
Mhm.
that you have to let that you have to let that shoot run out really long, and then not only do you have to run it long, but then it causes coarseness once you run
Right.
it out, and then if you're trying to go for tight, uh, small, like if you're trying to do like a show hen or make maybe a chew hen up to the standard Kifu shoe, and we're trying to keep within certain size parameters, you can't let that run out. So you'll probably
Mhm.
never get that flower, which
No, you
is which
never
is a
will.
bummer. Yeah, because you're always going to be cutting back again unless you're blowing it out and you're letting it
Mhm.
grow for girth, and you're like, oh, cool, a flower out there. You're always
Yeah.
going to cut it right back.
I've never seen a flower on any of my ramified sea hibiscus.
Yeah, because you're always cutting back. You're not getting to that full extension.
Hmm.
It's like crepe myrtles, the same thing. Like I know
Right.
there was a request to do a crepe myrtle, full crepe myrtle episode, which will be coming in the future. We'll do one of those as well. But yeah, it's just like a crepe myrtle. Like the crepe myrtle will pop out this long, crazy shoot. And I have gotten a crepe myrtle to bloom closer in after repeated cutting, and but the energy is not there anymore. It's just
No,
kind of like little tiny sad blooms that
but
stick around for a
there's
day.
also, have you noticed that the purple crepe myrtles bloom closer into the design than like the pinks
Yes.
or the whites?
There
Yeah.
is a true dwarf. I think it's called
Yeah.
the oh God.
There's
Um,
Chickasaw and
Chickasaw, that's it. Yep.
but there's another one above that. There's a semi dwarf that's my favorite. A semi dwarf that's purple that blooms within the design,
Yep.
and I don't see it too often, but that's really good show hen material.
Excellent. Yeah. So with this smaller, hypothetically, with this sea hibiscus that you're starting production on now,
Yeah.
You should be able to get nice tight ramification, and then it will flower no matter what off of a new stem, even if you
In
cut
theory.
back. That's the
In
theory.
theory, if I can get it to like grow, all it wants to do is flower.
Yeah. And you
So
can't stop it. So you're
no,
even when you're blowing out, it's flowering the whole way, right?
it's flower. Yeah, I mean it won't blow out as fast as other stuff because
Of the
it's always
energy.
flowering, always
Yep.
going to flower. And so unless I'm going to sit there and cut the flower off constantly, which
Hmm.
I just don't do it because I like them. But
Okay.
yeah, I'm just
So
in a, and it also has a slightly different bark. It's kind of darker gray. The leaf is slightly more laterally compressed. No serration.
huh.
Definitely closer to the Taiwan import green genes. And so yeah, all in all, it's going to be a really cool hibiscus.
Yeah, I'm really curious because I I know that, and so this is part of the reason why we're running the show is that so we can talk about bonsai as time goes on, and these are things that are literally happening right now. Like Mike tell me that he's got his hands on a new sea hibiscus that could potentially be really awesome, like for potentially for showing like this. Like, so I mean, it's just this is great news, you know. Maybe you can get some really gnarly material out of, let's say, your typical green, and then you could veneer graft this strong flowering variety onto it, right?
Right. Absolutely.
So yeah, that
Absolutely.
that's good stuff. Like that's really exciting stuff.
It's
So
great stuff. And not to mention the genes are there. So now cross pollination opens up. And it's just gonna it's a lot of fun. I mean, I've had more fun. There Sea hibiscus is probably my second favorite species, but it is my number one favorite tree to work on.
yeah, yeah.
Number one.
it it kind of gives you the basics when it
It does.
grows, and then all you have to do is, like you said, either wire and then go into cut grow mode with it, or if you're trying to, I mean, so yeah, let's talk about sea hibiscus because a lot of people will probably look them up online, and if you say Minlo, so it's
Yeah.
IMIN dash LO.
Eight. Well, yeah, Minlo, but it's actually you want to type in Min Swan. So
Mhm.
MINHSUANLO. And you
Yeah,
want to look up Min Swan Low sea hibiscus.
yeah, and you'll
And
see those trees.
yeah.
And just like we were talking about earlier, just a little while ago, was like you look at the sea hibiscus and you look at it in the pot and it's grown out straight and it's got that silvery looking bark, and you look at a Minlow tree and you're like, damn, dude, that thing is scaly, it's rugged, it's got scars and
Mhm.
twists. And so how just like talking about sea hibiscus as if we've never heard of how that happens before. How does that happen, Mike?
Okay. So what I know is this is that in Taiwan and in Japan and certain countries, the way that they grow trees, everything goes through a development period. So that's like you and I have talked about this till we're blue in the face. But
It's
for the
fine.
listeners, that means that basically we're growing the tree at its fastest rate. So we're growing it in big pots. We're not pruning it as often. We're basically wiring with big wire and putting bends in things and letting everything get big and chunky. Um, the problem with that is when we're developing our hibiscus is if we don't make a lot of chops, if the tree lives too good of a life, then you're going to have a boring tree. So I always tell people, think of like if I was sitting across from you at a bar and it was time for me to tell you my life story. And I get to it and I say, well, I had a trust fund, everything I ever wanted, I got, never had any difficulties, never had a cavity, never had this or that. You'd tune out in seconds and you'd think, what a boring life. What an absolutely boring, what a boring story. Even if it's not a boring life, great life, boring story. And so bonsai is the same thing. Is if that tree lived too good of a life, it's a straight trunk without a wound on it, and then it's boring. And so
Mhm.
what you want to see is not necessarily open wounds, but you want to see wounds that have been open and then closed, open and closed, open and closed. And this should happen numerous times in the tree's life before you get to refinement.
Yeah.
So once you get to refinement, that closure stops. So your closure is going to be a lot harder to get those wounds to seal up, especially at the rate that they're doing in development. So when I'm growing mame trees, to illustrate, is I can usually create a quarter size wound on a gassed up tree, a tree that's got a lot of energy. I can make a quarter size wound on a sea hibiscus and have that healed in 2 weeks. Quarter size wound, gone. And so within a year, I can have 3 or 4 wounds healed on the tree, completely gone on the trunk, showing a bunch of gnarl and all that healing and all that, those fat rolls that start to form on it. And all of that occurs within a year for a mame. So it's literally just making sure that you're growing at the rate that you need to be when you're creating these wounds. One of the biggest things I tell people, especially with sea hibiscus, when we're doing grafting, is what's your biggest fear of doing grafting when you're learning? What is your biggest fear?
It's
And they
to
say,
fail
well,
the graft.
fail the graft. And I say, okay, what's the big deal? You fail the graft. Who cares? And they say, well, then I'm left with a wound. And I say, who cares? If you're in development, which is usually when we'll be doing our grafting, all of that's going to wash away. Like literally by the time you make it to refinement, it's gone. It's gone. You don't see any of it. And what you do see adds interest to the tree and keeps it from living too good of a life. And so that's what I know about those trees that you see in Taiwan is either A, they're clip and grown to hell, where they're cut and chopped and healed so many times that they create a ton of interest, and the proportions they're creating are also very stark. Or they're collected trees that have been grown on capstone that have been there for 50 years and are really, really old.
Yeah. So there could truly be some sea hibiscus Yamadori.
Oh, there are sea hibiscus Yamadori for sure. I have a cool sea hibiscus Yamadori that's all barky and everything, but it's just a bad leaf. One. Yeah.
And you can go and graft on that one pretty easily.
Yeah, they're the easiest tree to graft on, I think.
So, and there was a question that I attempted to answer on last week's episode about because you were talking about cutting back and then growing back out and cutting back. And then somebody had mentioned cleaning the middle area, and they wanted you to. I think I did my best explaining it, but let's get it from your mouth.
So, usually, like when we're doing clip and grow method, we're doing it under the pretense that we're looking to make bifurcation. So you're looking to divide the branch into a V, into 2 different branches. And so you want the branch to go from 1 branch to 2 branches, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, and so on and so forth. Well, the problem is when you're creating bifurcation, you're usually going to be left with a little stub in the middle between the 2 branches. And that stub needs to be cleaned out properly between the 2 branches so that you're not wasting time. Because if I put a year into the V, if I'm creating my bifurcation and I put a year into that, and I still have an inch of stub in between where those 2 branches meet, then I've healed nothing. Once I clean that stub, I'm still going to have that wound. And now the problem is that the energy I needed to heal the wound, I've already grown.
Yep.
It's already been put onto the tree and it didn't go anywhere. So now I'm at a loss of how to heal that wound. Now it's a lot harder.
And so if I could add a little bit, Mike.
Yeah.
So when we're cleaning out that middle area, when that stub's cut off, and for some of those out there that are like thinking, oh, well, what does he mean by like, okay, so I wasted the energy there with the stub there. What I had referred to when I answered it too was on the last episode was the stub there, the cambium is creeped up the stub. And so when you cut the stub off, you're reopening up that wound again.
Right.
And losing the potential in energy. So that was something that I was kind of thinking about as you were going. I was like, this might sound a little abstract still, but it's just that concept of why do we cut back to a stub? To make room for a little bit of dieback if it's going to happen. Sea hibiscus, they don't really die back that much. It just cut it back.
Everything dies back 1 internode.
To the node that you're going to go to.
Yeah.
Yep. So you're going to cut the buds that were active there off, and then you're going to lose that section. And with the sea hibiscus, if you do your planning right, especially if you're building for ramification or you're trying to get it to just bud like crazy at one spot, there's usually a good handful of buds waiting right there in a tight section closer to the truck. So you're going to keep going with the clean out the middle area thing?
Well, I was just going to say that the important part of clip and grow and the important part of positioning that wound where it's at is that you're now healing the wound from two different sides.
Yep.
So one of the problems with tropical trees, especially sea hibiscus, is it's not a maple. A maple, I can make a 4-inch wide wound on a trident, and I can grow a pinky sized apex, and I can heal that wound, and it doesn't make logical sense. Same with Stewardia, same with crepes. Crepes are the same. They just have this weird tissue that seems to crawl without having to grow the tissue somewhere else. I will tell you, sea hibiscus and most other trees grow at a rate of, if you cut off a quarter-sized trunk and you make a quarter-size wound, you now will have to grow a quarter-size amount of tissue somewhere on the tree to heal that wound. And so really, you're growing what you just cut off. You have to grow the same thickness branch that you just cut off to heal the wound. And so with sea hibiscus, the only way that you're going to get a woundless tree is if you're dividing the wound into two each time. So if I go 1 to 2, and now I'm healing the wound 50% on one side and 50% on the other side, well, now I'm splitting that wound. By the time I go and I cut those two branches, I now have two wounds that are half the size of the original wound. Mm-hmm. So that's cut number 1. Cut number 2, now it's a quarter the size of the original wound. And it goes on, it exponentially goes on until the wound is gone.
Yep.
And so,
yeah, go ahead.
That's important, you know?
And this is for those out there that are listening that are not used to like big brained, like ramification, branch building talk like this. We're building taper into the branches, not just the tree. So that's why Mike keeps saying stuff like, now we're going into dividing the energy down into two smaller branches that are 50% of the bigger the first branch you came off of, and then that goes into a lower percentage until eventually, if it was possible, which is some species it is, to go almost infinitely to where it's so twiggy that you get into your fine. So if that's getting a little over some of our listeners' head, that's kind of where we're going with this. And if we're still developing these cuttings, if you have taken on the cutting challenge to take the cuttings and blowing out your stock, this is not something you necessarily need to worry about right now. But let's tell them a little bit about, if you're, so first you stick the cutting, then you bend it once it has good roots on it. With sea hibiscus, what is usually your next move?
Well, the first thing is, and this is very important, is I first wire them and I wait until the end of the day. So I wait till the end of the day to wire them when they're at their driest. And so I wire them at their driest.
This is a good tip.
The next important thing I do is I don't put all my movement in day 1. All I do, think of your first day when you put the wire on as you are relaxing the branch. That's your job. You're going to relax it. You're going to put like a really loose, really lame bit of movement into it. And then you're going to come back a week or 2 later, probably 2 weeks later, and then you're going to compress those coils a lot. You're going to compress them quite a bit. The third time you come back, you're going to be able to do whatever you want to that tree. You're going to be able to bend it any way you want. And so you should be able to get 3 or more bends out of it before the wire has to come off, before you've set that trunk line.
And next thing I do. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. So then the next thing I do is I usually do all this work while they're in little 4-inch pots. And so once they get to the point where I can't keep them standing up on their own and they're falling over all the time, then I pot them up to 1 gallons. And 1 gallons is usually where they will either, one of two things will happen. Either if I want a bigger tree, I'll go up, I'll continue to up pot them. Or if I want a shohin or a nice shohin. If I want a shohin or mame, a 1 gallon is the end. I don't go any higher than that.
Yeah, because you don't have to work those roots back. Because
no, I don't want
to go up. Your roots can start to run. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to have to work back, 10 gallons of roots.
So one of the questions that I had for for cutting back, because I've had this a little bit in conversation with people, and I just want to brush up on this myself as well. When you double pot a tree, and then you go up, and then the tree fills that pot, and then let's say like it's sitting on the ground, and then it just gets out of control, goes through. How many times, or how much, like how many times do you need to cut back roots, or how much root can you take off to get back to your ideal amount of
All
roots?
of it.
You can take it all off. This is sea hibiscus, guys. Don't take this. Well, and Chinese elm and other
But
durable species.
I would say most of them. I've done this with a lot of different trees, a lot of different tropicals. And what I'll tell you is it's all going to correspond with what you leave on the tree. So like if I have a big bushy ass tree and I take off 90% of the roots, well, that tree's going to die. And that's going to be from imbalance. But if I have like a Premna and I go from a 1 gallon to a thimble size pot, that shouldn't be a problem if I cut it back to like 4 or 5 little stubs with like 2 leaves on it, and I have like 1 or 2 feeder roots, because the physiology is still intact. There's feeder roots leading to leaves, transpiration is occurring, the plant is still metabolizing. So for me, it's not a question of too much, it's making sure you balance. And I'm not talking about like defoliating the tree, because I believe in like a 70-30. Like you can have 70% leaves, 30% roots. Okay.
Interesting. I've never heard you say that before.
No, because it's something new that I've spent a few years working on before I was content to start teaching it. And honestly, it's something I read in Mike Hagedorn's book. Is he mentioned something about defoliating. He's like, defoliating, I don't defoliate trees when I repot. And I read that and I'm like, what does he mean? And I thought to myself, I said, I've killed trees doing that. I know I've killed trees not defoliating trees. But then I realized I'm reading the data a little wrong. And I think there's, just like anything written down, there's no room to ask questions and have him elaborate on the point. So what I think, what I've discovered is that you can have a lot more foliage and compared to the roots you're taking off. So when I do my typical repots now, when I go and I take a tree like a sea hibiscus that is already in a bonsai pot, already spent a year or 2 in bonsai soil, I go in there and I'll do the margins. I'll basically comb down the margins, comb out the mat of roots off the bottom. I prune all that off. I pot it, and I don't touch the leaves at all. And so, worst case scenario that I've seen, the worst thing I've seen happen so far is leaf drop, a little bit of leaf drop, and the tree honestly seems to recover quicker from it because it already has buds on the tree. It already is pulling water up through the trunk. It's already transpiring. And so everything seems to be a little more vigorous in its comeback. I can monitor the health of the tree. I don't have to look at a defoliated tree and think, are you going to bud back? I can look at it and say, oh, crap, this thing's losing leaves like crazy. It's not happy. But I can't tell anything if it's defoliated.
Yeah, because then you're really just sitting and staring at the buds until something happens.
You're hoping that buds form. Yeah. You're hoping that it works. And so for me, I've really turned a whole different theory on that. And I do believe you have to cut the tree back somewhat. You can't just take a tree and have no roots and leave it fully intact at the top. I don't agree with that. But I do think within reason, if you balance accordingly, you can have more foliage than roots.
Yeah. I mean, kind of referring back, you said you got that from Hagedorn's book. I mean, Hagedorn, like going and learning with him and then reading his book, there's some things that I've seen that have changed the way that I've even dealt with my deciduous trees, where I do things now during repotting that makes me feel a lot more comfortable, but then makes me kind of think back about things that I've done with trees previously and been like, wow, I really dodged a bullet when I did that to that tree.
Yeah.
And there's things that are completely unnecessary now that I realize you can get away with these things, because just like you said, you were reading the data, you were misinterpreting it in a different way. And now it makes so much more sense now. Of course, this comes from experience, guys. you have to repot trees. You have to experience these things. You have to get certain types of root systems. And
Right.
every time that you pull a tree out of a pot, you're not going to get you're not going to get textbook results.
Nope.
It's something weird's going to happen. Trust me, every
Sometimes,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? You know what's funny is everybody has their favorite soils. Me myself included, and everybody hates on turfus. Everybody hates it. But what's funny is I've seen great root balls come out of turfus soil. I've seen really terrible root balls come out of turfus soil. I've
Hmm.
seen really, really great root balls come out of akadama. I've seen really, really terrible roots come out of akadama.
Yep.
So there's there's a lot to it. You know, there's a reason why they offer degrees for soil science.
And we don't have them,
No,
but
no, no, but I'm just saying, even if you want to get into the hobby, you got to understand that like
yeah,
soil is a big thing, you
it's
know, soil and
applied
water.
applied practice, sunlight, water, oxygen. It's like a car. Your
Yeah,
basics is something that I always remembered, my dad teaching me, oh, well, what's wrong with your car? Well, I mean, it's doing this and that. Basics. What does it need? What are the basic components?
right,
Air, fuel, and spark. He's like, you
right,
got those things, it works. And that's how it's helped me conceptualize that more. And like you said with roots, it's like I pull this out, it's got great roots. I got plenty of sunlight. I've been fertilizing. I got good water,
right.
but all my other conditions are controlled by my zone, by the soil that I'm using, by the species that I'm using. So yeah, all those factors really, really will change things. So it just has to be all off experience with
And
these
yeah, you
things.
just got to take it slow and enjoy the journey and fear
Yeah.
the finish line. That's what I tell my students. I do. I tell them fear the finish line because nothing good comes at the end. There is no end. But
In
like
bonsai.
thinking in bonsai,
Yeah.
there is no end. And thinking that you're going to get to this like magical perfect tree, it's never going to happen. It's always going to be, the bar will always move. So the second you get to where you wanted to be yesterday, you'll want something else. You'll want more. And
Hmm.
so the bar continues to move. And so the best thing I've learned is you just have to enjoy the journey as much as you can, and you will do better bonsai because of it, as corny as it sounds. So if you put off, like, if you just say to yourself, I don't care when this is done, you truly mean that, you will do better bonsai.
Hmm. That kind of got me for a second. I don't care when it's going to get done.
I don't care when it's going to get done. I don't care if this tree, if I have to put 20 years into it to make a perfect tree, it doesn't
Hmm.
matter because it's about the doing. It's about the doing. And that's why I stress like doing high level work and doing good work, is because in the end, that's all you're going to have out of this. Somebody could come and steal all your trees. A natural disaster could come.
Yeah.
You could be lost with all your trees. Tons of things can happen and your trees can be taken from you. And all you're guaranteed is that you have the present with them. That's all you have with them. And so the only thing that you take from the hobby indefinitely is the act of doing. If somebody
Hmm.
took all my trees, you know what? I'd be hurt and I'd probably take a week off where I'd sit and I'd sulk. But
Yeah.
eventually I'd go to Lowe's, I'd buy some cheap material and I'd start again because I know that my love is in the doing.
Hmm. And I think of a great way to just describe that is impermanence.
Impermanence.
In
Yeah.
understanding impermanence. And like you said, things happen. You lose your trees. I mean, with the techniques that we're discussing in this, especially in this episode, if you apply them and you learn them and know that, like what Mike said earlier in the episode, is something I really like to think in my head is if you're trying something different and you're progressing your techniques, then you're making trees better than you did before.
Mhm.
And just to, like you said, not to be cheesy or anything, but I feel like inspirational, like giving like inspiring speeches for all the bonsai masters. People's like, keep doing, keep trying, keep doing different
Yeah.
methods, and you will always make a better tree than who you were before. It's like it is that simple though.
It is that
It's that
simple. It
what
is
we're trying
that
to say. Yeah,
contrived. It really is. I mean, and
yeah.
it's one of those things like people often say, you know, well, that's very Zen, where you always into Zen things. And what's funny is I got into bonsai and I didn't really even think about the Zen implications of it. The times when I finally started realizing that it was heavily tied to Zen and that was an important aspect was when I really did have to think about all my trees disappearing. I had to play this mental exercise and say, well,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have great security. I I have nothing I can do about it. And so I have a choice. I can either get out of the hobby or I can continue to pursue it with the idea that this could end any day.
Yep.
And so with that idea, it's really it's provided me with an intense love of the trees where I'm like, hey, today could be the last day. And I really, really enjoy them. And I'm not afraid of it as much as I was. Now I'm like, I realize that there's tons of things that can happen in bonsai. I can't control all of them. And all I can do is continue to work and do bonsai. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes me feel all mushy and warm inside.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah, and another thing too is, and this is the experience of like the bonsai professional, is that not only do you get to work with your trees, but you get to have influence on others' trees and other collections and other trees that you're familiar with that might not even be trees that you have a chance to work with. You might just see them on a regular basis and have, I mean, you might have some influence being a bonsai professional. You're asked to do, pruning, wiring, trimming, repotting, whatever, every once in a while and stuff. But that's another thing is like in the ethos of bonsai too. If you lost your collection today, if I lost my collection today, if a listener lost their collection, bonsai's still there. So,
Right.
you could still go work on other people's trees and come back to it. And like you were saying, growing out cuttings and trading people for stuff.
Yes, exactly.
One of your friends might have a cool tree that they're like, I don't know what to do with this, but I'll trade you 5 of those really sick sea hibiscus cuttings you did really good twists on because I could make cool stuff out of that. So I mean, it's always like I think this is one thing I always kind of lean into is just like community, join a club, make some friends that do bonsai. I mean, there's so much more to this. Subscribe to a publication like Bonsai Focus or one of the like American Bonsai Journal, Society Journal, whatever is in your country or state, wherever you're at. So, but yeah, like we were saying, this is all. Now we're talking more philosophically. This is the
But
the philosophical
again,
part of it.
that's the scary thing about bonsai is do it long enough and it will start to blur into the philosophical.
Yeah. Oh, you won't even know which side is the beginning, which is the end of how you feel about bonsai.
I'm telling you, it's weird. I never meant to be this way.
Like I wake up some mornings and I go, it'd be great if I just watered my trees today and none of this mattered. And sometimes none of it matters and I just water my trees. And then other days I'm like, God, this is so hard. I know. So I think referring back to sea hibiscus, is there anything else you feel like you need to say about them? Because we gotta always revisit them. If you guys are part of because we're running longer on this episode, but if you guys have more questions, for you guys that are in the Discord, jump in the Discord. Mike's in there now. It took him a little while. He wasn't in the correct Discord. We started another group, but Mike's in there now. So if you guys have questions about sea hibiscus, he can go in there and answer them when he has time. Any closing remarks on sea hibiscus?
We also do offer a good Zoom class on that as well on sea hibiscus, but something that I really think is a better class that we offer is the Clip and Grow program, which basically goes into the whole algorithm or formula for kind of making these trees without wire or use wire, but still going through the proportions and healing the wounds and going through some of the concepts that we discussed on today's episode.
Yep. And they can find those online lessons at.
Well, they just need to reach out, go to kitsunebonsai.com, send us an email because we'll need to book it because it's not I sit with you and basically I'll be there with you discussing the program, running through the program. If you have a sea hibiscus, we can talk about it. Or it doesn't even have to be sea hibiscus. It can be any tree that's going to lend itself to clip and grow theory. So not a juniper.
Yep. So you guys go over to kitsunebonsai.com, go look at offerings with classes, and they can sign up there. I'm sure it's like I said, but it's got to be scheduled because
Yeah, and
there's
we're gonna hopefully, we're working on that. I've looked into that, doing some like automated stuff, but as of right now, I'm not sure how the best way to do that is. So
Yeah. And as for the show here for little things, I've kind of thrown back and forth about how to do like either a live presentation or an offering that the
that'd be
listeners can go
cool.
look at, like a promo or a preview or something. Because we do have episode 50 coming up, and I do want to do something special for our listeners for that. So we'll keep that in
I
mind.
wonder, is there any way for them to stream video on? I guess Spotify doesn't do that, do they?
We'd have to do like a YouTube link. I have
I
an
see.
old YouTube channel that I can try to do something with, so it would kind of redirect to
I have a
Underhill.
YouTube channel too.
There
Yeah,
you go.
so
So we could figure
okay.
something out.
All
Um,
right.
but we could do like a three-way session where Carmen works on something, I work on something, you work on something. We'll figure something out, make it fun, make it like a little show within a show for our 50th episode coming up. So that's one
Yeah,
thing that we can promise.
that
Um,
sounds good, mate.
yeah, that sounds really good. So for a couple of shout outs real quick, thank if you've listened this far into the episode, thank you guys so much for listening. Like I said, you can come become a patron over at patreon.com/little things for bonsai people. Become a $1 patron if that's the best you got. For now, if we don't, we're not judging. If that's what you got, cool. Supporting the show is the best way to support our show, is to help us grow. But if you have $5 every month, you could become a best bud. Go in our Discord, hang out, talk to me, Mike, and Carmen. Talk to the other people in the Discord. People are brewing up some cool stuff in our Discord. It's a cool place to hang out. Talk bonsai with us. And then if you can just listen, and that's all you got, you don't have the funds for anything else. You're just like, yeah, I just want to listen. I don't feel like doing that. It's just not me. Maybe you just want to click subscribe. Click subscribe on Spotify, Google Play, Google Podcasts, or Stitcher is one of my favorite apps to use. Just wherever you listen to podcasts at, just go in there and just click subscribe. It's a good thing to do.
Yeah,
And
just
then
smash that like button.
smash that like button, turn on notifications, get a little bell going. No, and then shout out to Mike, our editor. Not Mike. You're Mike. No, Matt, the editor. Shout out to Matt O'Donnell for being our editor, for being a generous human being, for being a nice guy, for making us sound smart, cleaning up our audio. Go over to mattodonnell.com. That's ODONNELL.com with Matt at the beginning of it, of course, Matt O'Donnell. And if you want him to edit your show, he's got a contact form. Fill it out. Go talk to him. He'll work on a podcast with you as well. It doesn't matter. He's not picky on the content. He'll hang out, talk with you. He's also a bass player, and he plays a lot of music in Nashville. If you're a musician and you're looking for audio work and you want an audio engineer on music, he's your guy. Go check him out. Nice guy. Go check out underhillbonsai.com. I got some stuff on there. I've been lagging. I've been real lazy lately because I've been working on trees. I'm sorry, guys. I got thousands of trees and it's driving me nuts. But yeah, so they're in the ground, they're in pots, they're in front of the door, they need to be wired, reworked, and I got trees coming in all the time. So, but it's fun. It's fun
It's
being
fun, man.
managing a bonsai nursery like that. Let's pop on over to the bonsai word of the day, wrap that up, and then we'll say goodbye. But yeah, I found a cool bonsai word of the day. Found this really awesome source online for me to find some more nifty words. It's a Japanese word, back to the Japanese words that they use in bonsai. So sabamiki is our bonsai.
Sabamiki.
Yep, bonsai word of the week. Try to use it in I challenge our listeners to go use it in a sentence. Not amongst your bonsai friends.
You order it at the bar.
Yes, I'll have one
No,
sabamiki, please.
so sabamiki is the act of creating uru or hollows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Uru was actually one of our bonsai word of the week back when we had Jennifer Price on.
Nice.
And yeah, and I'm seeing on the actual translation of it here is making parts of the trunk that have been damaged or split by nature after spending several years in a natural growth area. So it's refined elegance, something that's just kind of the source that I got.
It probably is more elaborate than just hollowing
Just a
out
hole.
the trunk.
Yeah. It's nature's work is basically what this word means.
Well, and I think what they're saying is like beating up the trunk to make it look like nature's work. So I think oftentimes we refer to things that are sabamiki as shari and vice versa. And I think shari's a distinct phenomenon. I think it, in my
Yeah.
opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, but my interpretation of it is if it's not that ribbon like cross section and you're not getting that mizusui or whatnot, then it's it doesn't really seem like a shari to me. It seems if it's a very, very big piece of dead wood on the tree, that's not a shari necessarily to me anymore, you know?
Yeah. And so I guess I'm kind of going into this with a different idea with deadwood features on trees is now that we're starting to see we're starting to see categories and maybe subcategories of Shabamiki is holes or hollowing, some kind of damage that feels realistic. The uro is the actual hole. The
Right.
shari is the deadwood in the trunk, and the jin is the dead branch. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like this mixture. And like you said, like we don't really know. If there's somebody who is better at direct translations or probably knows a little bit better, that'd be, just shoot us an email or go over and leave a comment somewhere on a post, or evan@underhillbonsai.com. Just shoot me a line, drop me a line. So, if we can even organize this better, this is what we're doing this for, to learn these words.
Drop him a DM.
Yeah, drop into my DMs and let me know what Shabamiki really is.
See, yeah, that's how old I am. I can't even get the expression right.
I'm only saying it because I listen to so many other podcasts and watch so much other like YouTube content. I just pick up on all these newer things that come up, and it makes me laugh.
The kids are gonna drop you a DM.
Yeah, Mike's over there like dating himself basically with this. I'm just young enough to still kind of get with it. But Mike's like, he's kind of just not caring much about it anymore. He's okay.
I gave up. I learned everything I can learn. I think Facebook was probably my magnum opus for technology, and yeah.
And now we're stuck here.
We're stuck, and
we'll never send a tweet.
No.
We'll never make a TikTok.
No, well,
well,
maybe I'm not very good at it.
Yeah, we could try, but damn, there's so many more techniques and so many. Maybe we should just do just a whole study on TikToks one day. We'll just do an episode where me and Mike try our best to become good at TikTok.
Maybe we'll wait until we have streaming videos so people can watch us try and navigate that.
Yeah, that'd be kind of funny, actually.
Yeah.
Maybe not. I don't know. I don't want to make reels all day. That's not me. But speaking of reels, though, I just wanted to drop this in there really quick. Carmen has been making reels on her Instagram for Becoming Bonsai. Go over to Becoming Bonsai and check out Carmen's stuff. She's been making reels about like simple techniques of like pinching or pruning, or just little bonsai things that like something real quick, like 15 seconds. And you're like, oh, so that's how you do that. You read it in the book and stuff, but she's trying to come up with a series of reels of simple bonsai techniques explained real quick and simple, and just, there it is. And I thought that's a really cool little project she started up. So guys, go check that out. That's definitely, I think there needs to be way more than that. There are the glamorous, like the guys that do the content where they take like the tree and then they're like, here it is, and it's all rough and it looks like a big old piece of doo-doo. It's like a big old shrub, and you're like, what is that? And then like they spin it around and then the video ends in like a minute and it's like this gorgeous bonsai, and you're like,
I'm still
wow.
trying to figure out I'm still trying to work on that. Still working on it.
Yeah, it doesn't work out that way, but yeah. So I think we've said what we need to say about sea hibiscus. We're going to leave it there. Like I said, become a bonsai best bud, drop in Discord and ask us more questions about those things if you really want to know more. But yeah, thanks for hanging out, Mike, and talking about sea hibiscus and some philosophy. Man. It's always fun to drop philosophy on our listeners and make their brains swell up.
Of course. Yeah, they were like, oh no. Oh no.
This was supposed to be an easy episode.
Yeah. I remember seeing this meme where it was a dolphin chasing these swimmers, and these swimmers are running away scared, and the dolphin it says me with talking about philosophy, and then the people running away were my friends and family. And I just always think that's so true anytime philosophy comes up.
And you're just like blimping like dolphin sound waves at them.
Oh, they're
And they're like, stop.
yeah.
But anyway,
All right.
all right.
Well, I'm
Well,
gonna go get some sleep, man. I'm
yeah,
tired.
you do it, Mike. We'll talk to our or talk at the listeners later. But yeah, Mike, you take it easy. Have a good night, man, and we'll see you
Yeah,
on the
good.
next one.
Yeah, good night, everybody, and happy Fourth.
Happy Fourth to you guys when y'all listen to it, but it might be
All
past
right.
time. See you when you see
See ya.
it.
See ya.